Hey, hi all. Welcome back to Sales Enablement by Sharpsell. This is Arun, co-founder of Sharpsell. If you missed our earlier episode on making your salespeople better advisors, don't forget to catch up on that. The link is going to be below there on the comments. Today, I really want to talk about what sales enablement is and how do organizations approach sales enablement. So, before talking about sales enablement, I want to talk about what salespeople really do, because when we spend a lot of time on the field, we see what organizations look at giving salespeople and what salespeople really think they want is not always converging. So we spent a lot of time on the field, and I personally have spent, time with about 200 field sales advisors to understand how they go and sell. And what I realized was, people have different inputs. So people have, let's say, inputs from the learning team in terms of helping them learn. Then you have inputs from the sales team, sales managers on how do you go about, your planning, your selling. Then you have inputs from marketing team on collateral, content, etc. But on spending a lot of time on the field, I realized two things. One, there is no one sales enablement or one thing that fits all. Because based on what I saw, there are two things that really matter in terms of the whole selling process. So one, I'll classify that as your seller maturity. There are some people who are fairly new in the system, some people who are new to selling your kind of products, and some people who are not, getting great results, who have low sales maturity. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have your superstar performers, people who get all your chairman award, who get your foreign trips, who go to vacations, etc. So this is, while this you have your seller maturity on one side, the other part of it is your buyer maturity, where there are some buyers who are very new to your product, who are very new to your company and offering, and what they require to convince them is going to be very different from, let's say, an expert buyer or somebody who's got a very high maturity, where you have buyers who really understand your product, who are probably already working with you, working with your competition, and what they really need to be reasoned with is on saying, why should you switch from one player to your company? So when we put this together, we saw that what salespeople need on the field to kind of drive different conversations will vary based on your particular buyer's maturity and your seller's maturity. And a lot of times we see organizations don't really focus on this part, because and typically the process that happens is to say, hey, let me kind of call my best sales team, best guys, ask them what they do, and then hope that the rest of my team can emulate what they do, and all of them would be successful. And we've seldom see that happen, because different people come in from different backgrounds, their drive is different, the way they go about doing their business is different, and we've seen that a cookie cutter approach in terms of saying emulate your star performer has not worked in most cases. And the other thing that we see organizations also doing is to say, hey, can I kind of ask my best sales team members to tell me what they need as a helping point? And their logic is fair. They would say, hey, my 5% of my sales guys bring about 50-60% of the revenue, so as long as I can help them, my productivity would go up, etc. But the reality is, what this top 5 or top 10% of salespeople want is very different from what the bottom 50-60% really want. Because typically these top 5-10% are sellers with very high maturity, and the way they would approach a customer and use some of these sales enablement tools is very different from the way some of your junior folks or some of your less mature salespeople would actually go about their selling process. So I think before we talk about what kind of sales enablement should I focus on, and how am I going to enable my sales team, I think it's very important to understand and recognize the fact that not everybody in your sales team is the same. It's like a cliched statement, but not all your fingers are the same. So it's very important to categorize your sales teams in terms of what their capabilities are and what their challenges are, and then talk about how you're going to enable them at different stages of their sales progression or their maturity progression. So the next thing that we see a lot of organizations do is, some organizations go about identifying who the different kinds of salespeople are and look at upskilling them. And one of the things that we see common focus going on is to really help people, in helping them understand the products. And we see a lot of inputs going to say, hey, let me kind of get your understanding level from here to here. How do I move the needle in terms of how much you can understand? And a lot of times what your salespeople really want is to not really know everything by themselves, but to say, there are certain parts that they're okay with understanding and explaining it to the customer. But there are also certain parts where they just want to be a conduit, where they say, what, I can explain a product till a certain level, and beyond that, I'll want to kind of give you more information, to a customer, give the customer more information that they can kind of consume and learn from, because it's not practical for a salesperson to know and understand everything about all the products that are being sold in the market. So what a lot of salespeople really look at is to say, while you're doing a lot of things to help me learn and educate me, the salesperson really wants something that can also educate the customer through them. So the ideal way that could be done is to enable this salesperson to share something as an expert, to say, what, I've explained certain points to you, but there are a few more questions that you may have. Let me do something. Let me kind of shoot out an email to you or send you a message very quickly on, let's say, WhatsApp or iMessage, where I'm going to, help you understand how this product can help you. And why don't you go through it and get back to me with specific queries that you may have. So the moment you do that, the salesperson really, feels empowered, because one, they don't have the onus of explaining everything to the customer. The second part is that they're able to close the loop and leave something behind to the customer, so that the customer can actually go through it, refer back to the conversations that they've had, and also get more information than what they had. And the third most important part is that I'm able to present something to the customer that's relevant to them, that makes sense to the customer in terms of educating themselves, rather than me trying to push something extremely standard, sharing a standard brochure with them, standing a standard deck with them, which the customer may not really relate to. So for a salesperson, what they really appreciate based on our field visits and based on what we've seen with organizations is, they say, help me educate the customer and help me narrate the customer's story back to them, and help me, customize my pitch based on what the customer's story or what the customer gave to me. Because if I can, repeat what the customer said back to them, in my own words, the customer is very happy because they opened their heart out, they poured out whatever they had, for 10 minutes in terms of what their issue, what their trouble, what their problem is. And I was able to capture that. I was able to narrate it back to them, and also talk about how our product or service can really help them. So that makes the whole enablement part and sales part much more easier than just talking about, how many meetings I attended, filling up a CRM, how many learning courses I attended. Because for a salesperson, these are all overheads, to have to, because filling a CRM, they don't really see a direct benefit for it for the most part. They think it's a management tool. Same way when you talk about learning systems, a lot of times salespeople look at this as a mandatory course that they have to get through with, and they don't really see a lot of learning coming from it. Also because they, look at immediate gratification, because a lot of times salespeople want to know something that they can use today, tomorrow. If you're going to give them something that you say, hey, why don't you use it in a month's time? To them, that's like a fairly long-term plan. And, they think it's all gyan. They think it's all, a lot of gas that's being dumped on them. And they just have to kind of, get going with this learning as one of the tasks that they have to do. So this is it for today, folks. And hope to catch you up soon in another session of Sales Enablement by Sharpsell. Thank you. Bye.